pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in this morning. Good Friday morning. Hope your week went well. Well, this is episode 15, and look, we're going to be talking about some strange stuff today. I know everything that happens around us, just seems like happenstance. You're going to find out today that isn't the truth. I got Patrick on the phone. My name is Chris, and you're listening to the Constitution Commandos. The government has to stage some kind of racist act so that we can believe that we have a race problem.
Yeah.
And that's probably what we're looking at here. So far, they haven't gotten the country to rear up and take up arms against the government, so they don't have a reason for martial law yet. I imagine 60,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate would get that started, don't you?
Well, see, we also have to look shortly after that ammonium nitrate just vanished. I guess David Copperfield was on that train. He made it disappear.
It's Chris Angel.
David or Chris Angel. But, well, hey, he might have been easier to retain. If anybody remembers that U-Haul truck that rammed that barricade in Washington, D.C., and the officers that first approached the truck pulled out a Nazi flag with the swastika. And if you look closely at the flag that they had laid out so beautifully on the ground beside the truck for a photo op, it still had creases from being in the package that it was in. It wasn't dirty. And then they claim that it was a Nazi, a white supremacist that was driving the U-Haul, and the white supremacist happened to be of Indian nationality.
I was going to say, how many times have they screamed white supremacy and it hadn't even been a white person that they're accusing of it?
Yeah, so that's, and that happened shortly after the ammonium nitrate. So I feel like that was
shooting about the same time.
Yeah, it was just before. That was just before boy with the U-Haul truck and the Nazi flag.
Yeah,
I think the damn cops. Yeah, but see, they have to create a problem. It don't matter the facts in the case.
Mm-hmm.
2 attacks, one with a U-Haul, one with a gun in Texas. Neither were white, and both were accused of being white supremacists. And it's like the FBI has been ordered to inflate and pad their numbers of domestic terrorism. And this way, because see, Christopher Wray has said a number of times on TV, the biggest threat in America is domestic terrorists by white supremacists.
That's right.
Well, if they're working on one case, one FBI agent working on one case is told to open a separate case file on anybody associated in that case. It's one case that turns into 5 cases. And that's how they've started saying, we've had a rise of domestic terrorism. No, we haven't. Not to mention the initial case you were looking at isn't domestic terrorism. It's people exercising their First Amendment right.
And even in the case of a shooting in a U-Haul truck driving through a barricade, that's not white supremacy anyways, simply because the nationality of the people they're accusing of white supremacy really doesn't fit the ticket.
No.
And, back in the 60s, you had, of course, the KKK and the Black Panthers. Now, could you imagine a white person being part of the Black Panthers? They wouldn't allow it. And the KKK, of course, the only way you were black at one of their meetings was be the guest of honor. And quite frankly, I think, not that I'm a supporter of either of those groups, but I think that both of those groups would be highly offended by what the government is calling white supremacists.
Yep.
And I mean, really, every time I have heard of something happening in this country in the last 2 years that they've labeled as white supremacy, there hasn't been a white person involved.
Nah.
It's crazy. Even the Marine up there in New York on the subway trying to restrain one guy that was scaring everybody on the subway. I mean, he was a white Marine, but that wasn't a case of white supremacy.
No.
That's a case of second-degree murder, which is purely asinine. But that's what I look at. That's what I've been seeing. It just amazes me that I don't hear any more outrage about it. And you're not going to hear it on the news, I know, because the news just isn't going to report it. It goes against the narrative. But it seems to me there'd be a lot more vocalization from the people, really. And I'm sure there is. I just don't hear it. I don't know if I told you, but I actually went and played a gig last Friday night, if that's what you want to call it. But I ended up meeting this guy there, and we talked for a long time. And a lot of what he was saying is what me and you talk about. And, I finally told him, I said, I'm really amazed that you know as much as you do, about the certain little intricacies of the bullshit that we hear about on the news even. And he finally told me, he said, listen, he said, I'm Cuban. And I was like, Cuban? He said, yeah, I'm not mixed. I am Cuban. He said, I don't know if you know this. He said, but of all the Hispanic countries in the world, Cubans are the most hated. And that's when he told me he moved here on his own when he was 20 or 21 years old, got his citizenship here. And I did get a chance to ask him how long it took him to get his citizenship, and it still boggles my mind, but he said it took him right at 12 years to get his citizenship. And when you hear somebody like that say that he will fight and die for this country, it sounds a whole lot different than when me and you say it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
But like he told me, he said, I know what communism looks like. I know what communism feels like. He said, people in this country need to understand they don't really want communism. And I invited him to come on the show. He said he would, but I know they went to Arkansas this weekend, so he'll probably be busy this week. But I do want to get him on the show. I think you'll enjoy talking to him. The guy is really highly intelligent. But I asked him, I said, so do you know the Constitution better than I do? And he said, well, I don't know how well you know it, but I know it.
Yeah.
And he knows it. I mean, that's part of his getting citizenship. But it almost made me feel like I was Ronald Reagan in 1960 talking to a Cuban back then who said he was so happy that the United States was here to come to. And Reagan said, yeah, well, when this country goes downhill, where are we going to go? Yeah. And that's really something to think about. Something that needs to be thought about very, very diligently, because we're getting to a point where there's not going to be any great place on the planet to go to. And it's coming rapidly, very rapidly.
That's right.
Now, aside from that train car and 60,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate coming up missing, I still want to know where that citation is.
Yeah, I've got people that have asked me, well, what about the missing people? Well,
exactly.
I'm okay. I'm not saying they're not missing. I mean, I'm not negating that at all.
I can tell you they're not where they said that crash was.
Yeah, before I can acknowledge that they're missing due to a plane crash,
you got to see the plane.
Then there needs to be some type of a debris field.
Yep.
Which, like I said, I was in that area. Nobody in that area heard anything about it.
You were there the next day, weren't you?
I was there. Yeah, I was.
It was like the next day or that
evening. The plane crash went down in Staunton, Virginia, which is where I think it's George Washington National Forest or something like that is. But it went down to Staunton, Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
I was just south of Roanoke in Virginia The plane went down at allegedly 3:30 on a Sunday.
Right.
Well, Sunday I was at a rest stop just south of Roanoke, actually a few miles south of the first scale house going into Virginia on Highway 81. The DOT officers typically, when an airplane goes down, I know this because I've been around a couple crashes, is
One a block
DOT
away from
and a
our house.
governor. Yeah, DOT and the governor typically will be notified, because DOT generally is going to handle any type of flow of traffic, or, basically the local end of access to the location.
Well, they're the ones
To
that
the
clear out
crash
the
site.
area, and yeah, right.
Yeah, and governor's going to know, for one, he's the executive of the state, and two, pending what was in the aircraft or what have you, he's got to organize assistance for the FAA and any federal authorities that are in there working on a down plane.
Right.
Well, now the DOT officers at the scale house looked at me like I was batshit crazy when I inquired about it. They heard about it breaking restricted airspace and fighter jets being scrambled, but
Yeah.
they did not know anything about the plane going down 70 miles to their north. Well, when I left the scale house, and if anybody's wondering why I was in the scale house, I got a ticket for being overweight on my rear trailer axle. I was in the scale house for a reason. But when I left there, I already had it planned to stop in Staunton at the intersection of Interstate 81 and Business Route 64, because there's a Love's Travel Center there, and I had to get some coffee and fuel and all that good stuff. No employee in the Loves heard about the crash, and this is just a matter of miles from the reported crash site.
Right.
I mean, people that live locally there had not heard about the crash, which I find it odd as well, because I know here in little backwoods Mississippi, if you get a single engine, high wing, private Cessna 172 goes down, or a 150, the whole state knows about it,
And
because
in a
it's on
matter
the
of
damn
minutes,
news.
Homeland Security is on top of it.
Yeah. So I find it hard to believe that a twin engine Cessna Citation 540 went down, a jet went down, and nobody was aware of it. And I just,
especially within that close proximity.
yeah, I'm not, okay, I don't even know the best way to say this. I'm not saying the plane didn't crash somewhere.
Just wasn't there.
I'm not saying people aren't missing or dead. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that with the massive lack of visual evidence, and with the bullshit the multiple articles I read have so many differences in them. I mean, none of them are on the same page. These journalists are writing from anonymous sources. Nobody at the FAA is so top secret you cannot mention their name. Sources at the FAA say this. Who are your sources?
Right.
If it was a field agent or whoever the flip for the FAA is going to send to a crash site, you would think they would say their name, a spokesperson for the FAA, or, an FAA official, so-and-so, but they're not even doing that. Their names are not top secret.
Don't mention the FAA. I can tell you that plane traversed over the northeastern part of the country enough to pass quite a few air traffic control centers.
Well,
nobody's reporting anything.
Well, I keep hearing people using the argument of hypoxia. Well, most of these jets have a cabin oxygen sensor.
and it
If
alerts
their
the pilot.
oxygen, and it doesn't wait until the oxygen is fully gone before it goes off. It happens
As soon as
to
there's
where
a
a drop in
deflection.
pressure.
Right.
Yes.
It can
Okay.
be a minor leak, and it will go off.
And that way, the pilot's responsibility at that point is to contact air traffic control, notify them of the mechanical problems they're having, drop altitude to a safe, oxygen-rich altitude, and then request emergency landing.
But it initiates emergency procedure in the cabin. But
I don't believe that hypoxia. Now, could hypoxia cause a pilot to go unconscious? Yes. Absolutely. But I do not believe that aircraft was without cabin oxygen for long enough that he got hypoxia. Another thing I find hard to believe. What is another thing I find hard to believe? Murfreesboro, Tennessee is right there on the line of Virginia and North Carolina.
Right.
So the flight plan was from Murfreesboro, Tennessee to New York. Well, I already know that the Cessna Citation cruising speed is around 450 knots.
Right.
Okay. I mean, it can go faster and it can cruise a little slower. That ain't stall
cruising
speed
at altitude.
Yeah. Okay. 450 knots at altitude from Murfreesboro to New York can't be more than what, an hour and a half flight at most?
2 hours tops, and that's if he slows down.
Okay, well, this is the other issue I've got. They said that it descended from what, 28,000 or 30,000 feet?
They said it dropped 20,000 feet per second.
Well, this is what
That's
I want to know.
faster than free fall.
Man, I've gone from Jackson, Mississippi to freaking Houston. I've flown a lot of places. Those jetliners cruise at usually 30 and up.
Mm-hmm.
From Jackson, Mississippi to Houston, Texas, which is further probably than Murfreesboro to New York. We didn't even hit 30,000 foot. And if we did, it was for such a minimal time before we even got to our descent. We went up, we came down.
That's it.
Granted, we're talking about a jetliner, but I'm not talking about a 737 either. I'm talking about a Smollett.
Yeah, but you're not talking about much variation in speed, though.
Yeah, but I don't see the altitude even being reached.
I don't either. But now here's the other thing. The other thing is, according to the flight path that they show that aircraft took, it took off in Tennessee, the northeastern part of Tennessee, flew across the southern part of Washington, D.C., inside Washington, D.C. border, then turned north and covered the whole eastern side of Washington, D.C. Not outside the border, inside of Washington, D.C. Now, you and I both know, especially after 9/11, there is not a plane going to breach Washington, D.C.'s airspace, period, right?
No.
Okay, why did the F-16s not get scrambled until after a plane was over Washington, D.C., when ATC said that they had lost control with the pilot?
Yeah. I have another thing.
How did it make it all the way to New York, make a U-turn, if hypoxia was the case, made it all the way to New York, made a U-turn, and flew a fairly straight line for a pilot that had hypoxia, and crashed?
Yeah, because if it was set, they tried to use the excuse that it was on autopilot. Okay, a lot of those aircraft are autopilot flown.
That's right.
The pilot's going to get it off the ground, get it to altitude generally, and they're going to turn around and set autopilot.
But autopilot is set for a particular destination at which altitude,
Yeah, I mean, when you load in your coordinates for an airfield, chances are Yeah, and the only thing that might change, air traffic control tells you a different runway. You remove it off a damn autopilot, and the pilot's going to land the damn thing.
Or
If
you
you've
have another
already got
aircraft in your line of flight. But
right,
other than that, you're not changing.
yeah, and those computers on those aircraft, they're called IFR ratings,
That's right.
instrument flight ratings.
That's right.
If
Instrument flight rules.
those computers will definitely put you on the runway. I mean, within probably a few. They're probably so good now. They'll probably put you within probably 6 inches either way of the center of the runway.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's say he went to New York, and let's say he had it on autopilot. Well, the destination was New York. That's where the flight plan was, listed as.
Mm-hmm.
There's a flight plan listed before every plane takes off. You have to log a flight plan, and you have to notify the FAA where you are going. All right.
And you don't even leave the runway without talking to ATC because they have to clear you for takeoff. And without a flight plan, you're not cleared. And if you try to take off anyway, that F-16 gets scrambled a lot sooner.
Well, okay, let's say he was going to New York. That was a flight plan.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when he did not touch down at that airfield, he was already had to have been in communication with the tower. Okay.
As close as he was.
I'm sure that, well, yeah, because the tower is going to pick him up on radar way before he's at the airfield.
Mm-hmm.
So autopilot would not have turned him around because New York was the destination.
Right.
Okay. So hypoxia is out of the question all the way up to the turn. Now,
actually, hypoxia is out of the question right where he turned north in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I don't understand. I don't believe anything about the report. I don't know. They were big Trump supporters. I'm not quite. There's a lot of Trump supporters. There's a lot of NRA people. So I don't think they were just targeted. The lady was a staff member for Trump when he was president. I'm not really. I don't know. I'm wondering if the boom everybody heard was an explosion and not sonic boom.
I've said that many times, but there were 2 explosions that were heard in 2 locations that were far enough apart they didn't hear the same explosion.
Well, there's a few things about it that make me question it. And the biggest thing that makes me question every bit of it is
the hypoxia.
Yep. Damn ABS brake light came on. That's bullshit. I'm pretty sure it's my damn pigtail back there, or it's a trailer. I've had this happen before. Yeah, I don't believe the hypoxia story.
Well, I have a solid reason for not believing it. I was an AT in the Navy. And for those who don't know, that's an aviation electronics technician. I was an intermediate technician, and I worked on radar systems. Now, our search radars, our radar altimeters, and the radar alarm warning systems that I worked on, all 3 different radars, they all had 2 cards in there that are very, very, very important. A pilot card and a co-pilot's card. If you fly below a certain altitude, or if you're flying, it looks like you're fixing to fly into the side of a mountain, that pilot's going to get a signal in his headphones to let him know danger. That's what it's there for. And that includes any kind of depressurization in the cabin. That pilot card will signal and let him know something is wrong. Now, in planes like the Citation, if there is a depressurization in the cabin, not only will the pilot be notified, usually there are face masks that come down to where each person in that plane can have access to oxygen until they can get to a plane to a lower altitude where it's not required that they use.
Well, I don't think it was they never reported anything about a depressurized cabin. I think the cabin was still pressurized. They were talking about the quality of oxygen in the cab was bad, which that's the part I don't believe.
Which would also signal the pilot.
An alarm. Yeah, it would
That's
signal
right.
some type of an alarm would go off on the first fluctuation of it. Yeah.
Mhm. But what they're declaring is that, remember when they scrambled the F-16s, one of the F-16 pilots reported the pilot of the Citation was slumped over the controls.
Yeah.
That had to be around Washington, D.C., because Washington, D.C. is a no-fly zone. How the hell did that plane make it to New York, make a U-turn, and crash in Virginia?
Yeah, I'm not. There's too many holes in the story, and not to mention that everything in that part of Virginia is mountainous. I don't think you can go 5 feet with level terrain there, unless it's a bunch
Not
of
to mention
excavating
all
that
the
went on and
forestry.
made a parking lot.
Right.
But it's all, and I'm not confusing the Smokies with the Rockies, but the mountains in the Smoky Mountains are rock.
Oh,
They
yeah.
are.
They're like
They are
Arkansas.
not just. Yeah, they're not like dirt hills. They are stone. They're rock. The ground is not going to absorb that jet or any airplane, even at a nosedive from 28,000 foot. It's not going to embed itself in the earth without leaving some area of a debris field.
And don't forget those engines, like you mentioned the other day, they're made of titanium. And
yeah, the turbines ain't evaporating.
You don't disintegrate those upon impact. Titanium's a hard metal. I mean, if that plane came straight down and hit rock, the engines would probably deflect and bounce and end up probably several hundred yards away from where the crash site is. But they're not going to disintegrate, even if the plane caught fire. It's not going to happen. But the aerial view that was shown on the reports that I saw, it looks like the trees have been disturbed, but there is no wreckage visible, period, which makes me ask the question, where are the passengers? Where's the pilot?
Yeah.
I'm not so sure they're actually missing, but I'm not saying they aren't, but, where's the wreckage? The NTSB
basically
has nothing to put together to figure out what happened.
Yeah, and all plane incidents, private plane, jet, they collect wreckage and they reenact or they reconstruct the plane. I mean, they don't build it and make it a working aircraft again. They lay everything out and they put them where they're supposed to be in a hangar or a lab to find out what happened.
And by what happened, that means, was there an explosion on the aircraft? Was there ailerons that malfunctioned? I mean, they can determine
malfunctioned. Yeah, elevators. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Oh no, sure.
That's the biggest claim that I'm saying. It does not make sense. So I do not believe it because none of it makes sense. Now, y'all are free to believe whatever y'all want about it, but
now, not to be misunderstood.
I just
the report that was given makes no sense. I'm not even saying the plane didn't go down. I'm not saying the plane didn't get shot down. What I'm saying is the report that was given is, I mean, like I said, I was in the aviation business, so I know for a fact it makes no sense. I mean, you don't have to take my word.
Well, there's another thing. Well, not to mention also how much time we spent in the aircraft. Dad had a plane. But
that's right.
This is another thing that really strikes me curious about this whole ordeal. That little bitty private plane went down over there by our house, right? I mean, literally, like a block from our house.
Too. Yeah.
Well, we go over there when it went down. We heard it. We heard
it before it went down.
We both, So we heard it when that son of a gun went down.
Oh, and by the way, we heard this while we were actually talking very loudly or getting excited because we were actually being little kids and playing a racing game, having a good time. And we heard this.
But we go over there into the woods, and before we even got there, we were like, we were only like a block or two. Man, I grabbed my camera and we went over there. We got in the woods. We got right outside of the little perimeter that they had taped off. We never got inside the debris field, though. So we didn't break the law. We didn't cross any lines. We didn't. But yeah, that place was crawling with every
Local police.
agency.
Yep. Local police.
Yeah,
county police,
NTSB, FAA,
DHS, everybody.
I mean, everybody was there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now that happened within minutes.
We
Now,
actually saw DHS approaching the scene as we were walking out the front door.
Okay, well, that aircraft that they're talking about in Virginia, it went down, reported at 3:30 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
They discovered the crash site, which
At 8 o'clock.
I can only assume that they were going off. Yeah, I can only assume that they pinged the transponder. And at 8 o'clock that evening is when they found it because of alleged terrain issues, being able to get in there. I can understand that to an extent, but having been in the military and done what I had done, I've been inserted to heavily wooded mountainous areas via U-860 on a rope. So
that's right. That's what I was just going to ask. Where was the aerial reconnaissance? Because I didn't see anything in any reports about helicopters or airplanes locating the crash site.
Well, there's a gap of time there that I find very difficult to agree with because of a 4-hour lapse. Well, 5-hour lapse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they knew where the plane was because it had a transponder. They knew exactly where the plane was. It didn't take till 8 o'clock to locate it. Now, did it take till 8 o'clock to access the crash site?
Maybe.
I still have a hard time believing that in a sense. But I still don't see any wreckage. I just have a hard time buying it.
No wreckage. Not with the scene that they showed. I mean, they showed an aerial view that was very limited. All you saw was what they wanted you to see of disturbed trees. But there was nothing at the base of those trees. Nothing.
Yeah. And another thing about it that I find odd, I mean, after 9/11, granted 20-something years ago, and after everything that's happened, you mean to tell me that an event that causes the DOD to scramble some freaking fighters to escort a private aircraft out of restricted airspace gets zero coverage? Bullshit articles, only media coverage. Really? You scrambled jets. I remember when there was a guy, what was he in? Like an ultralight helicopter or an ultralight plane?
You're talking about the one that crashed at Washington's lawn? No, the White House
but he was a postman. He was a postman or something. And he flew over there, and that was all over the news. But you're going to tell me, but you're going to tell me that a jet flew in restricted airspace, actually scrambled fighters, and there's no news coverage.
That's right.
Bullshit. Bullshit.
Well, folks, that's it for today. What do you think? That's crazy information, isn't it? Why don't you leave us your thoughts about it in the comments section? Let us know what you're thinking. And don't forget, go visit American Spirit Novelties and Apparel.store and support the Constitution Commandos. Until next time, on behalf of Patrick and myself, we're the Constitution Commandos, and we're out.